Hi, this is Peggy from War. So today I'm pleased to welcome Lina Ismail, the Chief Commercial Officer at Optimiz and one of my great friends as well. So Optimiz is a digital optimization partner delivery solution across the AI ops spectrum. So Lina has an extensive experience in innovation, technology, financial services. So we are very fortunate to have her with us today. So thank you, Lina, for taking the time.
Thank you, Peggy, for having me. And it's so wonderful to be able to chat with you, even though I miss seeing you in person. Virtually it's just as good. Yeah,
We're going to be
for
very
now.
soon, hopefully. I'm just looking for a patio, that's opening nearby. Okay, let's go with the first question. From your perspective, what are the major impacts that COVID will have on the financial services industry?
So I think there's going to be, and I think you rightfully said it, this new normal where consumers are going to expect things to be provided to them in a much more fluid way. I think they want to have access to services the way they want to have access to services. I think COVID-19 is going to accelerate that. We are now living in, the environment where we cannot access things through traditional brick and mortar, services. I think a lot of the services, as we all know, are much more, leaning towards digital, landscapes. And I think what we have to do is recognize that, consumers and businesses as well are looking for ways to get access to capital, to do their traditional banking services, to be able to access information whenever and wherever they need it. And I think more so now because there aren't really physical channels for them to rely on as easily, and there's apprehension from consumers to want to go through those types of channels. So I think in order for us to continue with the growth that we need in this economy, we need to be providing those services much more. I would say fluidly is the word, but much more cohesively too
Yeah.
for consumers, right? So all around.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. And so I wanted to ask you questions on new regulations and policies. So do you see new regulations coming up from COVID, and maybe some regulations are linked with what you just mentioned, maybe they're not?
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's going to be a heavy dependency on the regulatory environment to change to support greater use of technology. There's going to be heightened awareness and risk around cybersecurity threats
Yeah.
because of increased reliability or reliance, I should say, on digital services and providing services through digital channels. I think as well, there is going to be a coordination that's required between government, regulatory bodies, and businesses.
Mhm.
And I think there's also their emphasis there, I would say, is that in order for policies to be really effective, there needs to be that collaboration across the ecosystem. And what
Mhm.
I think will happen is that it's not just going to be required within Canada and within the countries themselves, but also globally. So I think there's going to be some sort of universality, I guess, if you want to call it that, of how people want to consume services.
Uh-huh.
It's no longer going to be defined by borders, and I think that it's going to require cooperation across the globe between those organizations.
That's a very good point and a very good segue actually in my next question. So in terms of global financial stability, you mentioned obviously cyber attacks, you mentioned global oversight. Where do you see the financial order going? I absolutely agree with you. We need more coordination across countries. Cyber is something I'm particularly worried about. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting. It makes me think about how technology can enable these changes and can enable a much more secure environment for us, right? And so when I think about cooperation, it's going to be cooperation around an understanding of what the challenges are, understanding that these challenges are not specific to each country, but that they are global in nature. Looking at the way consumers want to actually, consume these services. I
Mhm.
think again, there's going to be a universal way that consumers are going to want to have these types of services. So there's a lot that can be derived from that awareness and that type of conversation. So I think it's very much education based, and across these organizations to have those types of forums for I would say discussion, but also then the outcome of, well, what's the analysis that's then going to result in policies and regulatory
Okay.
environments that are much more conducive to supporting companies like fintechs
Yeah.
I think that have been able to accelerate maturity, digital maturity, I would say, of the incumbents, and to also help protect us at the same time, right? So the technology can enable more fluid delivery of services digitally, but it also can help protect us. And I think that's where we're going to use aspects of intelligence. It's one of the things that we do, in the business that I'm part of today, is that you look at aspects of, algorithmic intelligence is what we call it in the context of AI ops. But as you're delivering digital services, you have to worry about your infrastructure, your network, your applications, and you have to monitor all of those things, not just for performance, but also for, reliability and security.
Yeah.
Figuring out whether there's going to be a hack, predicting sort of behavior around these types of events so that you can be much more proactive. I think a lot of that, to me, is something that should be shared because it's not a competitive advantage anymore, right? And so, right? And so if you can create that kind of hub of knowledge, whether it's an institute or something that's global, and can actually take all those learnings and those technologies and provide them to financial institutions and governments and other partners within the tech ecosystem, then we can actually fuel that type of protection. But also, we can also create greater transparency, and we can also enable better service delivery, which ultimately is the whole basis of this, right? We have to continue to operate globally in all of the economies across the globe. And in order to do that, we have to take away that sense of, I guess, apprehension that has been created as a result of COVID-19 and doubt and uncertainty. And how do we restore certainty? How do we get people to realize that living in a digital world, there is certainty that you can create within that. And there is, I think, a lot more insight that people probably didn't have before around what their financial institutions were doing, how they were doing it, and how they were operating. So if you can create that, and I think we can through some of these actions, then I think we can become so much more effective than we've ever been.
Yeah, well, way more effective, but also way more cost effective.
Yes.
But also you're talking about being proactive versus being reactive. So all
Yes.
these things are very necessary to really be on our front foot versus our back foot. So I'm 200% with you on this one. And everything else you said already. But, so in terms of resetting competitive positioning, so obviously the crisis really upend all the business model. What do you see is going to be the potential winners, the potential losers, and what's going to be the new order actually in the financial services landscape?
It's a really great question. I don't know if I have the crystal ball to see sort of ahead, but what I can say is that there are some characteristics that these organizations that are going to come out on top need to actually have. And I think one, it's the ability to actually partner with fintechs in a way where they're purchasing solutions, they're purchasing capabilities that they otherwise would not be able to have. And they don't have the time to build right now, even more so, right? It's now just officially, the last nail in the coffin to say, don't bother building it yourself. Just get there, grab it from whatever company, is out there that's doing it really well. And when I say that active partnership, it's doing it with intention. It's not just saying I'm announcing a partnership with a fintech and saying, great, check the box, I'm looking good.
Exactly.
And I've assigned a team of people to do that R&D and do the work that they have to do. And I don't mean to,
you work in innovation, tell me.
I think it was it? I think Sue coined the term, maybe it was her and Jose Yaftin used to say it was the theater of innovation.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So, yeah, right. And so you've heard it many times, but yeah.
It's
So
it's that, yeah.
and so I get it. I mean, PR and the image and perception obviously is great for shareholders and for stock value, but I think at the end of the day, it really rests on them being really doing things with intention and going through those partnerships that actually is going to drive better products and services for their customers. And so how do they do that while also making sure that the government is trying to support and encourage that? Because I think that government, there's so much that we can do within the way our country, runs and the way the government runs. And I think that there's an opportunity for them to also, I wouldn't say, I would say probably almost mandate that we are, compelling the FIs in, the sort of the established FIs to actually open themselves up to participating in much more active partnerships.
Yeah,
And, you know,
I agree.
and I think the other thing when we talk about open banking, you know, I think we've said this, it's sort of also is a good segue into sort of bank as a service. You guys, you know, they have the infrastructure, they have the systems that sort of they run, you know, I guess they're the lifeblood of the bank, right? And so the idea that you can build on top of this to provide much more portable and accessible services. And so, you know, having them act more of like, you know, the facilitator
Yeah.
rather than, you know, the engine, I think would be really, really important. And a willingness to want to bolt on services. It's this ability to share and to adopt a practice of actually having, you know, not just APIs in place, but the ability to use interoperable services and have that be expanded across, you know, the service offerings of any financial institution, right? So there's some consistency as well in how the consumers are interacting with them. But then the business model has to be, you know, fee for value. Really, at the end of the day, it's looking at how you're providing value to each of the types of consumers that you're servicing. I often think about small businesses and how they have just been almost, you know, I would say obliterated because there really isn't an easy way for them to get access to capital, to be able to get access to services that can help offset some of their operating expenses. You know, and I think sort of the Wave Financial and other sort of applications like that, they're great, but we need the banks and the FIs just as a whole, whether you're talking wealth management or retail banking, to be able to provide kind of cohesive set of services so that when consumers are coming, you know, in the door virtually now, that they can have access to what they need in the way that they need it. And I think that that's going to be a very big shift for them, because right now the fee structure is not designed that way and their business models aren't designed that way.
Well, and you know, you and I, we've been in the industry for maybe too long to tell, but I'm sure you've heard about Client 360. I think I was a junior at CGI 15 years ago. I was already hearing about Client 360, and you're still not seeing it. So it's still very much silo. I'm pushing your product, I'm pushing your service, because I don't want that the guy sitting in the office next door have
Right.
your information and try to steal you away from me. I mean, there is a lot of things that's coming that way. So it has been bad for the clients. I mean, with
Yes.
that Canada, the clients are the ones who are paying some of the highest fees
Correct.
in bank in the developed world, you know, and you're like, oh well, that's an interesting position. So it's
Exactly.
it's I hope that this crisis is going to give the opportunity to make the changes that should have happened already 5-10 years ago.
100%. Yes. You
You
said
know,
the exactly that I often think about. It's change that could have started and could have been actually so much more further along if we had taken and if we had allowed, you know, I guess, or push the boundaries a bit on the, you know, the mentality, because I think mindset is so like central to this theme, right? And if the mindset of, you know, the financial institutions isn't to be much more open, much more partner centric, much more collaborative, like to your point, if it, internally within the financial institutions it's tough because there are these walls built around each of the divisions and there's sort of a lack of willingness to try to share information about a customer. I think that was a great example. I think the same could be said of just the industry as a whole, right? So if I bank at, you know, Scotiabank and my partners banks at TD, and, you know, how do you as banks deliver services to us that are relevant to our lifestyle while still understanding that, you know, the household is comprised of two people right now that bank with two different institutions.
exactly.
And that portability, like, of my information, that if I decide to get a credit card with, you know, TD Bank, you know, why wouldn't I be able to easily take that kind of profile? We all know it's competition here, but the idea that if you were if you were servicing the consumer in a way that met their needs and met their lifestyle, especially when we're talking about post COVID-19, well, then you're going to retain those clients much more, right? And so you have a lot of us, for sure, I think, at the mercy of an oligopoly right now. That's
That's the
just the way
thing.
it is, right? We don't have many options, but I think more and more as we see the rise of other institutions that are much more nimble and not traditional banks, people are seeking, capital and other forms of loans through other providers that are outside of their traditional ecosystem. So I don't think that's going to preclude people from moving. But the question is, how much will people be willing to change if these institutions aren't going to change to adapt to their needs?
Well, and like what I see, I've been in Canada 17 years. So, I would say half my life almost
Yeah,
in Canada, half my life in France, maybe a bit more in France, let's be honest. But but I look at that and people don't complain here.
yeah,
So, it's going to be, I'm not happy with my bank, whatever. And you're just like, continuing the same. And you're like, well, if
yeah.
you're not voting with your feet, if you're not contacting, like customer protection in Ontario or whatever, when something doesn't work, it will never change. So big FIs also bank on that, on the fact that people have very, very high degree of inertia. And I'm not sure it's something you see as much in Europe or even in the States. So you have the oligopoly challenges, the fact that the banks are extremely cozy with the government, and
Yeah,
you add to that the Canadian clients that not saying
yeah.
anything. And you're like, wow, why would they change? Why
Right,
would they
right,
change?
right.
So
Well,
that's what I'm still
you're right.
curious to see.
Yeah.
Are we just dreaming that it's accelerating and things are changing or not, So
They're not, unfortunately, right now, that I haven't seen either. And I think it was funny. My sister lives in San Francisco, and so she was saying, we were trying to organize a gift for my sister who just had a baby, and we were exchanging money. And what did we use? PayPal. And so, I just said to her, I go, it's odd that I can't, from my financial institution to yours in the US, to be able to transfer money to you. Because
yeah,
why would I have to then transfer money to my PayPal account to then transfer?
exactly.
Right. So it's sort of, it's there's so many of these use cases that
Right.
unfortunately it's unfortunate for the banks themselves that they haven't been able to solve these things. Right. And so, there's a purpose they serve. And I think if they can realize how they can further extend that so that they can deliver services that are much more suited to what we need today, then I think that they're going to do really well. And those that can't, I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, they may do well in certain areas of like institutional banking, and maybe that won't change much. But I think when you get into consumer to small business, I mean, small business has just been underserved for so long. And you can argue, just like you said, that consumers have also, to a certain degree, and we've been complacent. But that's going to change because people are getting antsy, and then with uncertainty comes anxiousness. And I think they need to have services that make them feel comfortable, but also understood, and that they can access their money, access their investments, make decisions from their home now without having to leave to do these things. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so I think inherently we'll see what comes of it, but there needs to be change, and hopefully there's going to be a response to that.
So talking about changes, so what were the big changes in your house with COVID? Did you take new habits? Are you, I don't know, in the working out bandwagon every day, or meditation, or what's happening for you?
I love that you've already given me a bit of a guide on that, because yes, I have been one of those people that as much as I felt I was hibernating in the first few months, I have been working out a lot more than I ever have,
Great.
and that's been really great. And the kids actually have enjoyed it. We have also taken up meditation at the start of the day.
Oh, amazing.
Um, Amazing, yeah, and I have to say it's all through apps, of course, and that's what's been, what keeps us going. But it's great, and I think, for the kids it's been tough. So I think that's the thing that I'm obviously very conscious of, and trying to get them out a lot. I mean, the weather has been amazing, so it's
Yeah.
only helped us do that. But yeah, for sure, much more mindful than I think we were before. Yeah.
That's
So,
wonderful. Mindfulness and people being conscious, meditation, yoga, working out, it's something that I hear a lot, which I think is amazing. You want to make the most of a bad situation. If it allows us to realize how fortunate we are, but also that maybe we're running like chick without head for no reason.
totally.
That
Yeah.
maybe there is a better way to do things. I've been doing yoga every day as well, so I'm in the in the mindfulness bandwagon, meditation, breath work. I mean, like the whole shebang, you know. So I really enjoy it. But thank you so much for taking the time to you know, speak with me and really share your thoughts. Super thoughtful, as I'm sure I was expecting it would be. But really, that was super fun. Thank you so much, Lina.
Thank you, Peggy. It was such a joy to chat with you. And thank you for having me on your show, and much success. And I look forward to seeing you in person very soon.
Thank you so much. Bye bye. See you soon.